Hi, I'm Leon. Quick updates before the video starts. First, thank you all for the support and encouragement I've gotten from my Volume 9 rants. The feedback and reception I've gotten is very encouraging. Second, massive thank you again to Kaiser Shounen for shouting out my channel. I really do appreciate it. Go sub to him if you haven't. Third, Justice League X RWBY scripts are complete. The audio will probably be recorded before New Year's, and Part 1 will be out a month or two after that. Finally, the visuals of this video will entirely consist of reusing Aquaman 2 trailer footage. Consider it an experiment on how well I can edit together a video with limited footage. So consider this more an audio experience than a visual experience. Thank you again, and enjoy the video. The DCEU. What started as one filmmaker's dark retelling of Superman spiraled into Warner Brothers desperately trying to catch up to Disney's budding MCU. When the dark and grittiness of Snyderverse failed, they hard turned to a lighter tone to appease the mass fanbase of MCU watchers. The tone, story, and direction of the DCEU continued spiraling until last year, where Black Adam underperformed at the box office, resulting in James Gunn being made head of the DCEU, and the decision to kill the universe off. What followed was nothing short of box office disaster. Shazam 2, The Flash, and Blue Beetle all released this year, and they were box office bombs, cementing the DCEU's death and furthering the decline of the superhero movie craze. And that leads us to today. The release of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, the 16th and final film of the DCEU, the last whimper of DC's cinematic universe. And, being one of the 7 people in my state who saw this film, I must admit, it was absolutely okay. A slight side note, after I watched the movie, I looked at my first community post, and that's when I first saw this comment. And man, the irony of reading this for the first time right after I left the theater. You look pretty silly now, don't you? And yeah, I rather enjoyed this film. Don't get me wrong, it has its problems, but it's a pretty enjoyable film, all things considered. I'm not going to do a scene-by-scene breakdown for this one, just broad strokes and highlights. This video will contain spoilers, so I do recommend that you watch the film first if you care about that stuff. With that out of the way, let's talk about what this movie is about. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom sees our good boy Arthur Curry as the new King of Atlantis and a first-time parent, juggling the responsibilities of maintaining the kingdom, a job he finds incredibly boring, and taking care of Arthur Jr., with the help of his father and the chick whose dog stepped on a bee. But trouble is afoot. Black Manta, in search of Atlantean tech to repair his Black Manta power suit, stumbles across the 7th lost kingdom of Necrus, and the Black Trident, an ancient weapon wielded by the evil King Kordax. With this trident, Manta begins a quest to free the 7th Kingdom from its frozen prison, all to gain the power to kill Aquaman. 5 months later, crazy weather patterns, rising temperatures, and a plague hitting Atlantis are becoming more frequent, and it's learned that all of this is related to Black Manta stealing an ancient energy source called orichalcum. This powerful energy source emits high quantities of greenhouse gases, and Manta is hoping to use this to free Kordax from his prison. In desperation, Aquaman does something insane, freeing his brother Orm, Ocean Master, from his prison. The two brothers then travel the world trying to find Black Manta and unravel this mystery. That I spoiled for you all, sorry about that. All the while, the two begin bonding as allies and brothers. The two find and destroy the orichalcum refinery, but Necrus is almost free, and Black Manta goes in search of the last key he needs to free Kordax. Blood from a descendant of King Atlan. This results in Black Manta kidnapping Arthur's son, and it's a race to save the boy and the world from certain doom. In the end, through the unity of the two brothers, Black Manta is vanquished, Kordax is defeated, the kingdom of Necrus is lost for good, and Arthur Jr. is safe. The film ends with Orm in hiding, and Atlantis revealing itself to the world, so that the land and the sea may stand united. Alright, that's the summary. Now, let's talk about it. We're going to cover the positive first, then talk about the negatives, because the negatives are more interesting and, in some cases, more funny. Again, this is mostly going to be highlights and lowlights. So, in no particular order, here's what I liked and thought was good. The relationship that Aquaman has with all the members of his family is heartwarming and lovely to see, especially with his father, brother, and son. How Arthur acts with his son is adorable, and the love and appreciation he has for his father and the work he did in raising him to be the man he is now is wonderful. But his relationship with Orm really carries the film. You can clearly tell that Aquaman, despite all of the bickering, arguing, and insults he throws, genuinely loves his little brother. And, as someone who loves his father and brothers, and is thankful for the relationship he has with them, that really got to me. Speaking of Orm, I enjoyed what they did with this character. The arc he goes on from reluctant hero to willing hero is nice to see, and there's a lot of fun to be had between Orm and Arthur. Most of the acting in this movie, even from Amber Turd, was pretty good. The pain and rage Jason Momoa demonstrated when his son got kidnapped felt so real, as did the relief on Mera's face when she got the kid back. The tone of this movie was pretty lighthearted, and I think it benefited the film. It knows when to take itself seriously and when to be more laid back. Also, I thought the jokes in this movie worked pretty well. Here are my favorites. When Black Manta learns that Aquaman married Mera, he says something like, "Not only did you take your brother's job, you took his girl? Shame on you, bro." I thought it was a funny observation. There's a lot of good comedy between Orm and Arthur, but my favorites are Aquaman tricking his brother into thinking a cockroach is the land equivalent of a shrimp, and Orm running. You see, because Orm spent his entire life underwater, he doesn't know how to run, so his arms are just straight back like a lazy Naruto run, and I thought that was a clever joke. The plot is mostly driven by character actions rather than blind luck, and I'm glad it was because it's so much more satisfying to watch. In terms of world building, the biggest thing to mention is that this film pretends it's not part of the DCEU. Objectively, this is a problem. Subjectively, I don't care. In fact, this movie only improves if you pretend it's a standalone film or part 2 of an Aquaman duology, so I'm happy to play along with it. Finally, Arthur Jr. doesn't die at the end. Believe me, I thought he wasn't gonna make it. The trailer hinted that something was gonna happen to the kid, but I figured he wouldn't die. But when Black Manta had him on a sacrificial altar with his blade about to stab him, I sat there thinking, wait, are they seriously gonna do that? The answer is no, he lives. Good thing, too. Would have looked real bad if the DCEU ended with infanticide. Especially when it technically started with infanticide in Man of Steel.
Krypton had its chance!
Alright, positives are down, let's go over the negatives. Bear in mind, most of these are nitpicks outside of the last 3, which are rather significant. I just found them interesting enough that I had to mention them to y'all. So, here they are in chronological order. First, Amber Heard is in this movie. Okay, she has maybe 20 minutes of screen time and has less than 10 lines, but her presence is still frustrating. Henry Cavill gets fired, but Amber Heard and Ezra Miller get to stay? It's so stupid. Moving on. Why did Mera decide to give birth in the ocean during a rainstorm? She's not underwater, she's in the shallows with Aquaman and his mother there to help her. That baby's gonna freeze in that water, and that seems incredibly unsanitary. Did you at least go to a hospital afterwards? Also, that baby is incredibly white considering that Jason Momoa is Hawaiian. This next one is very weird, but there's no other way to phrase it. Why did this film have Aquaman accidentally drinking baby piss twice? It wasn't a funny joke, and it's just weird and uncomfortable to think about. Black Manta gets access to a sonic disruptor cannon from Necros, and he uses it several times in the movie, and Randall Park's character, no I don't remember his name, helped him rebuild it. This is fine, but when they first use it, Randall says, "I didn't think you would actually use it." I know this is supposed to communicate Randall's realization about Black Manta becoming more evil, but what else did you expect from this mercenary pirate bent on killing Aquaman to avenge his father? That he's gonna use it to talk to fish? While I'm able to accept most of Atlantean biology, the desert Atlanteans are confusing. Rather than living on water, they supposedly survive on blood they consume. How did they evolve that evolutionary trait? How would that help them in a desert that has barely any life to begin with? And how has their civilization not descended into anarchy and cannibalism? It just doesn't make sense. Speaking of Atlantean biology, Atlanteans are able to go from skin and bone thin to absolutely jacked by being immersed in salt water, as is what happens with Orm. That raises the question about the legitimacy of Atlantean physique. Also, the Atlantean Council is presented as a major obstacle to Arthur and a potential antagonistic force in the film, but once Arthur goes after Orm, they become irrelevant to the plot, raising the question of why they were included so heavily in the beginning of the film. Later in the film, we learn that Necrus was frozen in ice because King Atlan put a spell on the kingdom to keep it frozen forever. Hence why Black Manta needs the blood of Atlan in order to free Kordax from his prison. But then climate change comes around and melts the ice. So, putting aside that Atlanteans have blood magic that can freeze entire kingdoms, how does magic ice melt from natural sources of heat? Shouldn't it be melted by magic heat? Or did I misunderstand how the freezing works? This is a nitpick, to be sure, but come on, science can't defeat magic, that's nonsense. Everyone knows science isn't real. It's just a conspiracy from Big STEM to make you buy textbooks. Also, why are the Necrus Atlanteans aquatic? They turned into zombies before Atlantis sank, and were frozen the entire time that the Atlanteans adapted to life underwater. So why are they so good at fighting underwater? Okay, those are the small problems I had with the film. Now for the big issues. First, the DCEU. Remember how I said this movie improves if you pretend it's a standalone movie? Well, the second that you remember it's part of the DCEU, a lot of the plot falls apart. This story involves a climate catastrophe and a potential undead army rising to conquer the world, yet Aquaman never considers getting help from the other members of the Justice League to save Atlantis and the surface. This isn't a problem unique to Aquaman, it's common in stories that are part of a connected universe. The MCU is plagued with issues like this in several movies. For example, the American president has been captured and is being held hostage? You'd expect Captain America might want to look into that. Wanda has taken a small town hostage and imprisoned them in an unending nightmare? Might be a good idea to call up Doctor Strange and get his help with the situation. The Scarlet Witch is destined to rule or annihilate the multiverse? Maybe your defenses should include the Avengers and Captain Marvel rather than a handful of sorcerers. In Aquaman 2, a lot of major plot points could be solved very easily by members of the Justice League. For example, we need to find Black Manta? Get Batman on the case. You need to get Orm out of prison without it being connected to you? Batman might work, but you could also use the Flash. You need to take down a refinery? I'm sure Wonder Woman would be more than happy to help you break that apart. You need to stop the Sonic Disruptor. Get Cyborg, he's good with tech. But all of these pale in comparison to the last one. Your son has been kidnapped to be used as a sacrifice to unleash an undead army upon Earth, and you know their exact location? Call in everybody, but especially call in Superman. What is Black Manta and King Kordax gonna do against a Kryptonian? This film being a part of the DCEU and Aquaman being part of the Justice League means that he should 100% be enlisting their help with some of these things, especially saving his son. As such, the film is dragged down. Second, King Kordax's first defeat and the plot hole that comes with it. So, Kordax and Atlan are brothers, they're fighting, Atlan wins, breaking the Black Trident in two with his trident, and then he uses blood magic to freeze Kordax. At the end of the movie, Aquaman uses his trident to obliterate the Black Trident and kill Kordax once and for all, destroying Necrus as well. The problem? Aquaman's trident is King Atlan's trident. The weapon that Arthur used to end Kordax is the same weapon Atlan used to break the Black Trident in half in the first place. And bear in mind, Arthur is the second person in history to wield the trident. So, why didn't Atlan just use the trident to completely destroy the Black Trident and or kill Kordax? If he broke the trident into more pieces and kept them scattered, then the trident wouldn't be able to influence those who touch it to do Kordax's bidding. And if Kordax was dead, then Necrus is gone before Atlantis sinks, and this film doesn't happen. It's pretty significant that this whole movie is reliant on Atlan not making a choice that would ensure that the world is safe from his brother. Now, you can headcanon that Atlan didn't want to kill his own brother, but that's not implied or suggested in the movie, and separating the Black Trident would only be beneficial, especially when King Atlan was aware of the dark magic in the weapon. So, yeah, they should have made it clear why Atlan didn't do these things. Finally, the thing that drags this movie down. Predictable, tropey, cliche writing. The plot of this movie is so predictable because the writer went with the most obvious idea with any given scene. When watching this movie, a scene would begin, and after only a few moments, I would guess how the scene would end, and I would be bang on the money most of the time. Here's an example. Aquaman begins this movie by being king of Atlantis. What's the most cliche thing they could do with this premise? Simple. The warrior hero turned king sucks at his job and or doesn't like being the king. That's exactly how it happens in this movie. Here's another one. Aquaman and Orm go to an underwater crime syndicate to try and learn where Black Manta is. What's the obvious thing to do here? Well, they end up fighting the crime lord and getting the info they need through threatening the crime boss before making a getaway. That's how it goes down in this film too. Another one. Orm ends up holding on to the Black Trident after it's been established to basically let Kordax possess people. What's the thing to do here? Have Kordax possess Orm and have him fight Aquaman, only for their brotherly bond to end the possession and they defeat Kordax. And nowhere is this cliche writing more prevalent than what they did with Randall Park's character. Every single thing they do with him is so tropey and predictable that anyone could see it coming from a mile away. The problem with cliche writing is twofold. First, it reveals a distinct lack of creativity on the part of the writers. They didn't take any of these tropes or cliches and change them up to create a more unique and interesting story. They just played the situation straight. Anyone can take a cliche scene and slap it into their story. That doesn't take much work or talent to do. But presenting a cliche only to subvert the audience in a way that's entertaining and intellectually satisfying? That's the stuff that great writers are made of. Second, it can be severely detrimental to audience investment. When you're able to predict the outcome of most scenes, you are more than likely to become unengaged with the story. There's no point trying to pay attention to what's happening, since you know what will happen with a single glance. And when you do that, you're essentially telling the audience to just leave their brains at the door. Don't pay attention, just enjoy the pretty colors and flashing lights. I can only speak for myself on this one, but I've never known a good story that encourages me to not pay attention. The stories I love, the ones I think are amazing, expect me to pay attention. Here's a good comparison. When I watch Volume 9, it's clear that the writers are hoping that I do not pay attention and that I do not look at the details, because that volume falls apart when you start looking closely at it. When I watch Volumes 1 or 2, I am rewarded for paying attention and noticing the little details, such as when we see the Schnee snowflake in the white trailer, then we see the same symbol in the background of the black trailer, creating a connection between these characters before they've shared a second of screen time together. See the difference? A good story expects you to pay attention and rewards you for engaging with it. A bad story demands you stop thinking about it and punishes you for using your brain. And while Aquaman 2 doesn't demand you turn your brain off, it's not exactly encouraging you to leave your brain on. Those are all my thoughts on Aquaman 2, but we now need to talk about the DCEU. There are plenty of videos out there covering the history and behind-the-scenes nightmare that is DC's attempt at a cinematic universe, so I'm not going to recount that story here. What I will say is that this year was especially rough for DC. There were 4 DCEU movies that released this year, a quarter of the DCEU slate, and it's nothing short of depressing how much they failed. It's not surprising to me that Warner Brothers is on the verge of bankruptcy and are considering a merger with Paramount. They've released nothing but bombs at the box office so far, at least with DC. And Aquaman is tracking to be the worst performer yet, worse than the freaking Marvels. Genuinely, I was the only person in my theater who watched this movie, and I would be surprised if more than 2,000 people watched it at my local theater during its entire theatrical run. And the fact that Aquaman is the last movie of the DCEU becomes tragically ironic when you remember how this film regards the wider universe. The final story of the DCEU, the last hurrah of DC's first cinematic universe, and this film pretends that it doesn't exist. There's something poignant about that, isn't there. So, to summarize, I think it's a pretty good film. It's cliche, predictable, and ignores the wider universe it exists in, but it has some decent heart behind it. I definitely recommend you watch this movie. It's an enjoyable film. The DCEU might be dead, and this film might be dead in the water, but hey, at least it ended on something of a high note. Rest in peace, DCEU. You were here far too long and not long enough. Let's hope that Superman Legacy is better. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.